Hello everyone, and welcome back to our weekly how-to and Q&A sessions here on YouTube Live. My name is Chris at DecoNetwork, and we're here to answer our clients' questions. So we'll give it a little bit of time for any clients who want to join in to the session to maybe raise questions. Again, if you're here watching, feel free to raise your questions through the live chat box. Entering your questions there. I'll be looking through those messages during the session and answering those questions that do come up. Alright, so while we wait for those user questions to come in, I do have a few tips to share. The first one is going to be jumping off from where we left off last session. If we jump into our website section here on the left hand side of the admin menu, if you recall, if you were here the last session, we created an affiliate store. And one of the questions that what we often get is, I've created this nice looking web store. How could I easily recreate another store with that same functionality or that same look and feel? And so DecoNetwork does give you the ability to clone a web store. And the benefit of that, you get, again, the same look and feel that you've set up for that existing store, the same configuration. So if you've set up certain products to be available and certain ones to not be available, or for example the available shipping methods, all of that configuration will carry over to that cloned store as well. So how do you clone a store? Well, you start off here in your websites list. You press manage next to the store that you want to clone, and that's going to take you to the store management menu. Here on the left hand side from the store menu, you'll choose administration, and from there you'll choose clone store settings. Alright, there's an option here that is not necessarily related to cloning a site, so you don't need to enable this to clone your store. All you need to do is look here on the top right corner of the page for the clone store button. So you'll want to click that. You will get this message that cloning a store is going to only clone 50 decorated products. So there is that limit when you're cloning a store as far as decorated products. Those are the ones where you've taken a blank and applied a design onto it. There is a limit of 50. So you'll get this warning. I'm fine with that. So I'll choose, in this case, this is one of my stores again. Hit OK. Alright, I'll get prompted with that same information that we were prompted with last time, which is the store owner details, right? We need to create a store owner account for this new one. So I'll call this new football. Agree to the terms and hit save. Once I enter in that store owner information, the system's going to start looking at the configuration and the setup of that existing site and copying that to a brand new store. This is perfect, again, if you're working with, for example, team stores or corporate shops where you've essentially created a formula that you want to recreate over and over again. Right, so what's common and what you might do is you might create one store for the football teams, one store for the spiritware store, that type of thing, right? So you have this kind of template that you can then pull from it and just clone it, and it's a much more advanced starting point than starting from a blank slate, a brand new store. Alright, and just like that, taken into manage that new store directly. So if I go ahead and view the site, we'll see that it has that same look that we set up on that original store last week. Alright, so we can see there on the home page I did set up that grass image to go with my football themed store. And if I go into the products, we'll see it has those same products that I added to the store as well. Alright, so I could use that as my starting point. Like we looked at last week, you have the ability to create products in batch where you start with one item, apply a design, and then apply that same design across several items, in this case those three. So what we could do from there is, let's say I want to edit one of these products. I could change that design maybe to the design of that's relevant to this new store that I've created, and I could take it all the way through. On step 2, you'll see this option, batch update other products using same decoration design. So by leaving that enabled, you can, just like we did last time, update all of those same products with the design for this new store. All right, so that's going to speed up the process by which you set up these different affiliate stores. All right, so let's get back to our main admin here. Alright, so hopefully that tip helps on how to clone a store and how to edit those decorated products to update with the design now corresponding to that newly created store. Alright, doesn't look like we have any questions coming in yet. Again, if you guys are on the session, feel free to type those questions in. We'll look through those throughout the session and jump on to answering those for you guys. Alright, the next tip I can go ahead and jump into is one that we do get pretty frequently from new users that are coming from an outside system, right? So this is not someone that has never had a website for their business. They may already have had a website for their business and maybe even already had an e-commerce solution that they were using previously. Right, so one of the concerns that that these users have in coming over to DecoNetwork is, you know, the URL structure that I had on this previous system. You know, it looked a certain way, and I don't want to lose the traffic that was going to those old URLs now with the DecoNetwork system. So to address that, we do have a feature called URL redirects that you can employ onto the new DecoNetwork website that you've created. And this is really only relevant once you start using the same domain that you were using on that previous website, and you now start using it on your new DecoNetwork website. So those same URLs potentially would now be targeted through the DecoNetwork system. And so what you would want to do is implement redirects so that anyone trying to access those old URLs would go somewhere, ideally somewhere within your new DecoNetwork system. Alright, so let's take a look here. So what I've done here is I've managed my primary store within my system. And what you'll want to do is go into Store Configuration, and there you'll find the option URL Redirect. And you're going to get a screen like this where you can start adding redirects. Right, so it's 2 fields that you'll have to enter in. And some key points that I could highlight is you can only redirect non-existing URLs. So if I pull up my site here, let's see. For example, I have some pages here like the t-shirts page. So let's say, you know, for whatever reason I wanted this path /page /t-shirts to go somewhere else. Maybe you know, a different website for any case, or maybe a new page that I've created. If I try and set up that redirect, so let me just do the one. So let's say /page /t-shirts. I want that to go to /page /fleece. Alright, just an example, but let's try and implement that. So we can hit save. So the system accepts it, but if I go to that URL, you know, it's not redirecting me to the fleece page. So you can only redirect URLs that do not exist. So let's say I change this. Maybe previously I had a page called sweaters, right? So I used to have that page. I no longer have it, but I want any traffic that was going there, or maybe is still going there for whatever reason, to now go to the fleece page. So I can save that. And on my website, if I try and access /page/sweaters, I'll get redirected to the fleece page. Right? So that's how the URL redirect works. It takes someone trying to access a URL that's not there and sends them to the entered in redirect to URL. Alright, now there's another option that you can do, which I mentioned, and that's the ability to redirect also to an external site. So whenever you're doing that, it's important to enter the full URL of that external site. For example, let's say I had a page called Contact Us, and I actually want that now to go to Google for whatever reason. If I try and do that, so let's save. This is incorrect. You'll notice that it puts a slash in front, and if I attempt to access that, so someone went to /page/contact-us, the redirect doesn't go through. So it's thinking that www.google.com is a subset of my DecoNetwork website. So what you want to do is enter in the full path, including HTTP or HTTPS if the site is secure, in front of that URL. Right? So by placing HTTPS ://www.google.com, if I now save that, you'll see no / is added at the beginning of that. And if I now attempt that page again, /page/contact-us, I'm redirected over to Google. Right? So that works. So those are the two types of redirects that you can implement, internal and external. When it's external, make sure to input the protocol, the HTTP or HTTPS, and it should function that way. Alright, and remember, this only works for non-existing URLs, which would be the case if you're moving from some other system over to DecoNetwork. Alright, let me check in on the chat, see if we have any user questions coming in so far. Alright, not quite yet, so let's jump into another tip. So this next tip that I'm going to cover is something that we've covered through our blog previously. The only issue being that information is a little bit outdated in terms of the screen captures and things that we have there are using an older interface. So let's kind of refresh that. This is a question that we do get pretty frequently, so it's good to have some updated information on it. So the feature that we're going to cover is how to set up additional fields that can be set during the checkout process, specifically during the first page of the checkout, the billing information. So you may, in some cases, want to collect additional information from the user at that point. For example, a lot of our users end up collecting things like classroom number or teacher's name when they do these spiritware sales or school sales. They want to be able to identify who a specific order is going to in terms of classroom, so which classroom is an order associated with. And so they do that by taking that through an additional field during the checkout process. And so we've always allowed that functionality. In order to really make it useful, you would want that information not just within your DecoNetwork Business Hub. you would also want that information accessible on the invoice. So perhaps your team is actually printing out those order sheets, and that's part of the order that's being delivered to the school. And in those cases, you would want that information on that sheet so you can easily disperse out those orders back to the school. All right, so let's walk through that. Let's jump in to the settings page from our admin menu, and from there you'll go into customer settings, and customer fields is the feature that we're looking at, so I need to enable that app. On the plan that I'm using here, this is a free app. Depending on which plan you're on, if you're on the standard, that may be a paid app. So you'll check that with your plan, but let's go ahead and enable it here now. So I do now have access to that. So we'll click back into customer settings and tick on customer fields. Alright, so in addition to giving you the ability to create additional fields, this custom fields page also gives you access to configure existing fields. So system fields like first name, last name, email address, things like that. Some of those you can turn off, so you can uncheck which stores they're available in. Others, like the street information, the address, the name, you can't necessarily turn off. But what you can do is define the usage of each of these fields. So if we click into define field usage here on the top right of this screen, you'll see this matrix here, which can look a little bit overwhelming when you first open it up. But to kind of demystify it, it's a simple matrix with the fields that your system has going down the left-hand side vertically, and horizontally you've got the different stages of the DecoNetwork system where those fields might display. So for example, the checkout, the billing details step, or the checkout, the shipping details step. Register, when a user is registering for an account. When the user is creating a store. And then in Business Hub, when you're creating a quote, or when you're converting a quote to an order or creating an order. So these are the different stages that you have access to define usage of these fields for. And there's two things that you can configure for each of those fields. Whether a field is visible and whether it's required. So you can have a field be visible but simply not required. So those are like optional fields. They're there if the user wants to fill out the information, but it's not necessary for them to do so. Otherwise, if there's certain fields that you don't want to collect altogether, you can uncheck visible and required. Just leave them both unchecked, and you simply won't collect that information. Alright, you'll notice that some of these fields for the checkout, the billing step, are required. So you won't be able to skip out on those because they are part of that e-commerce workflow. So you'll need that information in order to fulfill and actually ship out the order. Alright, but let's get back to adding your own fields. So back onto the custom fields page down here at the bottom, you'll find this button, Add Custom Field. So let's click on that. We can give our field a name. So let's use that same example as before, and let's say teacher's name. And there's different ways you could go ahead and collect that information. You could have it be a text field, a text area, a drop down, a checkbox. For our example, it might make sense to do a text field, or it might make sense to do a drop down. In your case, would really be up to you how you want that to come in. With the text field, you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of you don't necessarily have to know who the teachers are, but it also opens it up for potential user error where people might have typos in what they're entering in or things like that. With the drop-down option, you would have to know what all of those options are going to be. So let's say I select drop down, I edit my field here. I would now start adding new options to that field. So based on how many teachers I have, I would enter in all of the fields for all of the teachers that I want to display, and the user would simply select the one that's associated with their order. So they don't have to type anything in. It eliminates that possibility of user error with typing things in. But it's a little bit more work on your end. But in my case, I want to make it simpler for my end user, so I'm going to use the drop-down option instead of the text field. Alright, I can set a label width. I can set a container width. I'm going to leave those as default. Those aren't critical. I'm simply going to enter in my options. So we'll enter in some teacher's name here. We can go ahead and leave code empty. Alright, once you've filled in your options that you want to have for that drop-down menu, you can go ahead and press OK. Alright, and you do have the option to, again, select which stores you want this field to be visible in. Let's say you didn't want that field to be visible on your main site. You only want it on those affiliate stores that are doing the team sales. What you would want to do is uncheck all stores, click the select stores link, and then start adding stores. So you press the add store button. You can select which stores you want it in. So I might want it in football booster and new football as well. So I'll select those two, press add selected stores, and I'll see those listed as the selected options. I can press OK. So now those two stores will show that field. Alright, so let's go ahead and save that. Alright, so we're set as far as configuring that field. Now let's go ahead and create an order where that field information is available. Now it's important to mention, I guess, at this step that you'll notice we're taking that information during the billing step of the checkout process. So like the first name, last name, email address, and address information, this information that we're collecting is associated with that user. So it's not associated with just the one order, it's associated with the user. So that is something to keep in mind if you're doing a setup like this. You could potentially end up in a scenario where if you're taking an order, or if an end user is submitting multiple orders to you and they're wanting to select different teacher's name, if they, let's say on the second order, change that value, so maybe on the first order they selected Mr. Gold, on the second order they select Mr. Edgar, that field would be changed against their account. So when it comes time to printing out those orders, both orders would show up the value that was last selected. Right? So again, this information is set per user, not per order. But let's go ahead and again create an order where the customer has that information set on it. Alright, so I could do this through the web store, but in my case I'm just going to jump into Business Hub and do it from here to be a little bit quicker. So I'll start and I'll say add new order. I'll make sure to select store and select one of the stores that has that information, that field available to it. So I'll select football booster. And I'll go ahead and say add new customer. Alright, so let's just add any product in here. Alright, so that looks good to me. I'll go ahead and save that order. Alright, now we need to select the teacher information, so let's click into our customer account here, John Doe. We can edit that customer details section, and from here we can select the value for that custom field. So for this particular customer, all of his orders are going to Mr. Gold. We'll hit OK. And you'll see that is now set as the value for that customer. Right, so you could always look it up here in Business Hub. But again, we're trying to get to a point where that information is actually visible on the downloadable PDF that would potentially be included in with the orders being delivered to the school. Right, so this is the PDF. Let's go ahead and say that we want this information to be displayed here at the top, right? Along with the date shipped by, the shipping method, and the maximum delivery days. So maybe right below that is where we're going to start entering in the necessary code to input that information. Alright, so let's switch back to our admin section. Next, we're going to jump into email and order templates, which is the next option down from customer settings in the settings section of your admin area. And from there, we'll jump into order templates. Keep in mind, email and order templates is another feature which may be a paid option depending on which plan you're on. So again, pay attention to your plan. These options will still be visible regardless of which plan you're on. However, you will receive that notice if that is going to be a paid option for you. When you try and click into it, the system will let you know, and you can make that decision if that's something that you would like to add in. Alright, in my case I already have that add-on enabled, so I can jump in to edit my order template, which is the one that is associated with this sheet here. Alright, and to start modifying it, I'm going to jump into the Customize Templates section. From there I can turn on to start customizing, and we'll get this screen here. So these templates are based on HTML as far as the structure. You can also add in styling through CSS. And for the logic as far as determining when to show something or how to display something, we are using the Liquid templating language. So if that's not a skill set that anyone has on your team, and you're looking for someone to assist you with modifying these templates, now the change that we're doing today is fairly minimal, but let's say you would want to make some heavy adjustments to that, you would want to find someone that is familiar with certainly HTML and CSS, and even more beneficial would be someone who's familiar with the Liquid template language as well. Alright, but today our change is quite simple. We're just looking to add an additional line of text right below the maximum delivery days. So let's look for lines here mentioning maximum delivery days. Sure enough, here it is. So there's a section here. If the order has shipping days, go ahead and display this information. Alright, so what we can do here is enter in a new line, and we can type in the information that we need. So for now I'm going to pull it up from our blog, DecoNetwork.com/blog. If we do a search here for customer field, we'll see that that information. So let's scroll down here. Again, you'll see this blog post has some outdated interface, which we won't pay attention to for now. We've walked through all of the steps required to configure our field, and we're down here at this very last step, which is how to actually add that onto our order template. So the in order to get that data into our template, we need to paste in a placeholder. So by pasting in that placeholder, the system will know what you're trying to embed and populate the correct corresponding information. And there's a specific format for the placeholder relating to the custom field, and the format is listed here. So it's these brackets surrounding the information, but it's custom underscore fields dot and then the name of your field. Right, so the blog post gives this example here: customer dot custom underscore fields dot child's name. Now you'll notice that this looks kind of weird as far as the formatting. So let's try it with ours, and we'll kind of touch on that. So let me copy that placeholder, and we'll type it in here. Now I want this information to have a similar structure to these other lines, so I'm going to match the structure of those existing lines as well. So they've got a list element, they have a label, so the label in my case will be teacher's name. Alright, and then I'll go ahead and paste in that placeholder. And I'll close out my list item. Alright, now I need to replace these 3 X's with the name of my field. If I go back to customer settings and open up the customer fields, maybe on a new tab here so I don't lose my work, this is the name that I supplied: teacher '(s) space name. Now the template system here will not accept this apostrophe or the space, so, or really any non alphabetic character. So if you have any characters that are beyond that, alphanumeric, A through Z, 0 through 9, you'll want to replace those with an underscore, like we saw in the example. So what I would do in my case, I would delete that apostrophe, replace it with an underscore, and I would delete that space and replace it with an underscore as well. And capitalization does not play into this, so I'll just lowercase all of my letters there. So this is how it'll be formatted: teacher _s _ name. Again, eliminating any non-alphanumeric characters from that field name. Alright, so the system will use that placeholder, and it'll know exactly what information to pull up. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit save. So here in our template list, we now see that that order template has a green highlight, and if we look down at the legend, we'll see that a green highlight means that the template content is overridden. So I'm now using a custom template. An important note to make at this point is we do occasionally make changes to these templates, and when you start using a custom template, so at the point that you overrode a template, the content of a template, you stop receiving those updates. So if DecoNetwork tomorrow made changes to that order sheet, you would not receive those changes. It's not often that we make changes to those templates, but there are some times, for example, when we make a big change to how products are listed in Business Hub, or perhaps an improvement to make that sheet for a reason, you might consider from time to time refreshing your template. So the way you can do that is looking at the default template. So the default template, if you look at that page, will always show you the latest version from time to time, just to make sure that you have the latest copy of that code. Alright, so in our case, we made our customization. We're good for now, so let's switch back over to Business Hub. And let's view our order here for John Doe. So for now, let's try viewing as customer. This will get us the same layout that we do in that downloadable PDF. And we'll see over here on the right hand side section, Mr. Gold. Alright, so that's working just like we wanted it. Alright, so hopefully that's a good tip for all of those customers working with team shops or even corporate stores. Let's see if we have any user questions coming in. Again, if you're Alright, so we don't have any user questions yet, so let's jump back into the admin section here. Let me just close out these pages. Alright, and let's jump into another tip. So the next tip that we'll cover is custom product fields. So one of the questions that we were recently addressing for look at that. So we're going to jump into products from our admin menu, and from there on the left hand side we're going to click custom fields. I don't have any fields at this time, so I'll go ahead and create a new custom field, and you'll get similar options to what we saw with the customer field. So I can select what type of field I want. Let's say I want it to be a drop-down menu. Okay, I could set a name for this field. I'm going to call it deliver to store, and I'm going to add just one option. It's going to be turned on, and let's name that option mandatory. Right, so delivery to store is mandatory for all of the orders coming through that one store that are going to receive that processing fee. So I've set up the field just how I want it. Now I need to enable the option to actually charge based on this field. So what I'll do is I'll press this configure wheel on the right hand side, and I'll turn the option on new field affects price. Alright, and there's two methods that you can charge by, either a dollar amount or a percentage. So for our example, based on passing on a processing fee, I want that to be a percentage, and I want it to be a percentage based on the entire product price. So I'm going to check on both base price, which is your blank product price, and decoration price. Right, so I'll select both of those, and let's say I want to pass on 2%. So I can go ahead and save that field. So I've defined the field that at this point it's not yet applied to any of my stores, even though I've defined it. So the next step would be to go into the products that are going to be used on that store and enable this field for those products. Alright, so let's jump into the products section. Alright, so from here, there's a couple ways that you can apply a custom field. You can apply it to individual items. So if I configure this adult 5-ounce t-shirt, from the configuration menu on the left hand side I can choose custom fields. So right now the default is to use the system fields, any that are turned on by default. In my case, I don't have any fields that are on by default, so if I wanted to turn on this field, I would need to switch over to the custom fields option and then turn that field on. Right, so by doing that and hitting save and continue, I've now enabled that field for this product. So that's on a product by product basis. You can also enable that custom field for an entire product group, or how we call them, product defaults. So if I click into product defaults here from the left hand side products menu, you'll see we have a list of different groups that we file products into, and these are fairly broad, so things like apparel, mugs, headwear, aprons, things like that. So they're pretty broad. Any apparel that is coming from the DecoNetwork catalogs is filed into the system apparel type. similar with the header and things like that. But let's say you've created your own. We do give you access to create your own product defaults, and maybe in a case like you're working with stores, you've created a product default to file products for specific stores. So let's just go ahead and do that. We'll create a new product default. We'll call this Football Booster, or let's say Football Store. I'm going to use some of the same products there. And you'll notice that the product default has the similar option of custom fields. So I could say, for this product default, specify custom fields and turn that field on. And we can go ahead and save that. I do need to select the default category. I'll go ahead and choose apparel, hit save. Alright, so I've got a new product default, and rather than going into the individual blanks and now turning that field on, what I would need to do is go into the blank, and this time under the General tab, under Product Defaults, hit the Change link, and I can change that from being filed under Apparel to now being filed under Football Store. So by changing which group it's filed into, it's not going to use the configuration as it's set under that Football Store product default. So if I look under Custom Fields, even though it's using the system field or the default configuration, that field is on because that field has been set on for its parent group. Alright, so I could repeat that quick step for as many products as I'm going to be using on that Football Store, and I want that custom field to be enabled for it to charge those additional 2% on top of the initial pricing. Alright, so hopefully that's a useful tip for, again, those wanting to maybe pass on some type of field. It's also useful for other scenarios like products like stickers or things like that, where there might be additional costs for additional features for the product. For example, die cut, you might charge an additional amount or percentage for a die cut, or for different finishes, gloss versus matte versus texture. Those might all have a different cost. So you can enable those custom fields. Again, the simplest is a drop down. You can just have those different options that you offer: gloss, matte, textured, and you can associate an additional markup, either percentage or dollar amount that you want to charge. Alright, just keep in mind this is charged not for the entire order, not for the entire line item. This is charged per piece. So that's useful when you're doing something like a sticker item. That price would be per sticker. In other cases, you may want to make sure that the price that you're entering makes sense, keeping in mind that the price or the price modifier applies per piece. Alright, we're coming close to the end of our session here. I'll try and do one last tip for you guys. This one's going to be inside of the new page editor. So I'm going to jump into my website section. I'll click into my main site, and from there I'm going to edit my site. Alright, and the tip that I want to provide you, or really the feature that I want to highlight, is related to responsive design for your site. So out of the box, Our system does a pretty intelligent job of helping you to make responsive websites without thinking about it too much. So a lot of these widgets by default, as you change the screen width, will relay out and reformat appropriately, right? So for example, this product listing switches to a single column layout, 2-column layout, and then on the larger screens, 3-column layout, right? So these widgets will adjust depending on the size of the screen. There are some cases where you're maybe doing something custom or very specific, and you want the system to the website to behave in a specific way, or render the elements a certain way. So for each of the widgets that you have in your system, let me switch this to a 4-column row here. So for each of the elements, we have this section responsive properties, which determines how the system will render a multi-column section as you get into the different screen sizes. So you can see here by default the largest screen width for a full screen desktop is all the way across. You can then switch that so that on a smaller screen it would be semi-stacked, and then on the mobile you might just do stacked because of that decreased screen width. You wouldn't want anything to be side by side, so you can switch that to stacked. So this screen allows you to control how you want those things to display right at the different screen sizes. There is also an advanced mode, which allows you to actually determine the specific widths that you might want for these. So again, this is right now I set this to a 4-column element, and these are the defaults. So semi-stacked for a small desktop screen is still everything next to each other. Let's say I actually want this to be 2 up rather than still 4 up. So what I could do, I could switch it over to manual, and I could set these to 50%. So I'm manually overriding what the default is. And so now if I'm on a full desktop, I have all 4 columns side by side. If I get down to a small desktop screen, I only see 2 side by side, and then the next 2 on a separate row. If I'm on a tablet size screen, I would see that same 2 per row layout, and then lastly, if I'm on mobile, I would see the single column stack layout. Right, so this advanced mode gives you a lot more flexibility, not just going with the default, but allowing you to manually set your percentages on how you want these columns, these multi-column layouts, to display at the different screen sizes. All right. And in addition to that, on the next tab over, the Advanced tab, again, this is a little bit more advanced this is really if you're doing a lot of custom things, but I do want to highlight it. It is good functionality, and that's the responsive settings section. So similar to what you have here, where you can determine the different flow based on the screen size. In this section here, you can determine different CSS to apply at different screen sizes. So that can be extremely useful. For example, maybe on mobile, you want to hide certain sections of your content. Not the entire section, but certain bits might be hidden. You could use this tool here to set that property to hide those elements for the smaller screens. Alright, so definitely a lot of flexibility in this new page editor, both with the built-in defaults. They work pretty well. You don't necessarily need to get into using the advanced mode. The default options do a pretty good job of automatically rendering things pretty well at the different screen sizes. But again, if you want something more custom, you can jump in there and really customize how you want your page to be rendered. And again, even further, you can actually start applying custom CSS to apply per mobile size screen. Alright, so hopefully that one helps for those working on their website, getting that set up and getting it ready to go live. Right, switch that back to a single column layout. Alright, and with that, I think we'll call this session for today. Feel free to join back in with us. Let's see here. I'm not sure if we'll be in next Wednesday due to the holiday, but perhaps the following Wednesday, July 11th, we'll be back live here on YouTube for the how-to and Q&A session. All right, thanks for joining in, guys, and we'll see you next time.